Thailand's $27.5 billion gamble, the land bridge that could reshape global trade. For centuries, a narrow waterway between Malaysia and Indonesia has determined the fate of global commerce. Ships carrying electronics from China, oil from the Middle East, and manufactured goods from across Asia all must squeeze through this single bottleneck. It's called the Strait of Malacca, and every year roughly 100,000 vessels navigate its crowded waters, transporting goods worth trillions of dollars. But what if there was another way? Thailand is betting nearly $30 billion that there is. The Southeast Asian nation has unveiled an ambitious infrastructure project that could fundamentally alter how goods move between the world's two largest oceans. It's called the Land Bridge, and it's causing ripples that extend far beyond Bangkok's government offices, reaching into boardrooms in Beijing and raising alarm bells in Washington. This isn't just about building ports and railways. This is about redrawing the map of 21st century commerce, about challenging decades of geopolitical assumptions, and about one medium-sized nation's attempt to transform itself into an indispensable hub of global trade. The story begins with geography, involves billions in Chinese investment, and has attracted the nervous attention of American strategists. To understand why this project matters, and why it's become a flashpoint in the broader competition between the world's superpowers, we need to look at where Thailand sits on the map, what makes the Strait of Malacca so important, and what happens when you try to build an alternative to one of the world's most strategic choke points. The geography of power. Thailand occupies one of the most strategically valuable pieces of real estate in Southeast Asia. Stretching down the Indochina Peninsula, the country serves as a natural bridge between two massive bodies of water, the Indian Ocean to the west and the Pacific Ocean to the east. For decades, Thai governments have dreamed of exploiting this position. The most ambitious version of that dream was the Canal, a proposal to literally dig a waterway through southern Thailand, connecting the Andaman Sea with the Gulf of Thailand. Think of it as a Southeast Asian version of the Panama or Suez Canals, a shortcut that would allow ships to bypass the long journey through the Strait of Malacca entirely. But the Canal remained just that, a dream. The costs were astronomical. Environmental concerns were significant. And perhaps most importantly, the geopolitical sensitivities were explosive. Neighboring countries weren't thrilled about the idea, and the engineering challenges were immense. So the canal was shelved again and again across multiple governments and generations. Then, in 2023, Thailand's government unveiled something different. Not a canal, but a land bridge. Instead of digging through mountains and jungle to create a waterway, they proposed something more practical: build world-class ports on both coasts, then connect them with a high-speed railway line. The concept is elegantly simple. Ships arriving from the Pacific would dock at a deep-water port in Chumphon on the Gulf of Thailand. Their cargo would be unloaded, placed on trains, and transported 100 kilometers across the narrowest part of the Thai peninsula to Ranong on the Andaman Sea coast. There, it would be loaded onto different ships heading into the Indian Ocean, or vice versa. 100 kilometers. That's the distance that Thailand believes can change everything. The $27 billion question. The numbers behind Thailand's land bridge project are staggering. The government estimates the total cost at approximately 1 trillion baht. That's around 27.5 billion US dollars. For context, that's roughly equivalent to Thailand's entire national budget for healthcare and education combined. The timeline is ambitious but measured. Global bidding and construction are scheduled to begin in 2026. The target date for full operations? 2030, just 6 years away. But infrastructure of this scale doesn't get built without careful planning and legal frameworks. Thailand isn't rushing blindly into this endeavor. The government has been methodically working through the legislative process, crafting what they call the Southern Economic Corridor Bill. This legislation is designed to provide the legal foundation and regulatory structure for the project. According to the latest updates from Thai officials, the process is moving forward systematically. The draft bill has been submitted to the Ministry of Transportation for review. Once approved there, it moves to the Special Economic Zone Development Policy Committee. From there, it heads to the Cabinet, expected in early September of 2024, before finally reaching the National Assembly. If all goes according to plan, the Southern Economic Land Bridge Act will pass through Congress by April of 2025. The financing model is equally important. Thailand is pursuing this as a public-private partnership, often abbreviated as PPP. Private sector companies, both domestic and international, can secure franchise contracts lasting up to 50 years. This means they'll have the rights to develop commercial projects around the land bridge infrastructure, from logistics centers to industrial parks to retail facilities. The Thai government's economic projections paint an optimistic picture. They estimate that in the first year of operation, 2030, the land bridge will contribute 2.2% to Thailand's GDP growth. By the second year, that jumps to 4.8%, and at full maturity, they project an annual contribution of 5.5% to economic growth. 5.5% might not sound revolutionary, but in economic terms, it's enormous. That would translate to approximately $27 billion in annual economic benefits, essentially paying back the entire construction cost every single year once the project reaches full capacity. Beyond the headline GDP figures, there are the jobs. Thailand estimates the land bridge will create roughly 280,000 employment opportunities. These won't just be construction positions during the building phase, but permanent jobs in transportation, logistics, port operations, customs, warehousing, manufacturing, and countless supporting industries. For a country of 70 million people, that's a significant economic engine, one that could transform entire provinces in southern Thailand from relatively poor rural areas into thriving economic zones. In early May of 2024, Thailand's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Transport, Surya Jungrungruengkit, made a significant trip to Beijing. His mission was straightforward: pitch the land bridge project to Chinese government officials and business leaders. The reception was enthusiastic. According to reports, more than 30 Chinese corporations have expressed serious interest in participating. These aren't small players. We're talking about giants like China Ocean Shipping Company, China Harbor Engineering Company, and China Railway International. These are state-owned enterprises with the resources and experience to deliver projects of this magnitude. But why is China so interested? The answer lies in a statistic that keeps Chinese strategic planners awake at night. Approximately 50,000 Chinese cargo vessels pass through the Strait of Malacca every single year. That's roughly 140 ships every single day. China is the world's largest trading nation. Its economy depends on the ability to export manufactured goods to markets around the globe and import raw materials and energy resources to keep its factories running. And the vast majority of that trade, by volume and by value, moves by sea. The problem is that nearly all of it must pass through one narrow choke point, the Strait of Malacca. For Chinese strategists, this creates what they call the Malacca dilemma. It's a vulnerability at the very heart of China's economic model. If anything were to disrupt traffic through the strait, whether a natural disaster, a maritime accident, political instability, or military action, China's economy would face immediate and severe consequences. This isn't paranoia. It's basic risk management for a nation that stakes its prosperity on global trade. Thailand's land bridge offers China something it has sought for decades: an alternative route. Ships could dock at Thai ports, transfer their cargo overland, and continue their journey without ever entering the Strait of Malacca. The time savings alone are significant. Estimates suggest the land bridge route could reduce journey times by up to 4 days, compared to navigating through the strait. But the strategic value goes far beyond saving time and fuel costs. It's about diversification, redundancy, and reducing dependence on a single vulnerable route. From China's perspective, investing in Thailand's land bridge isn't charity. It's strategic necessity, and the financial returns aren't bad either. Chinese investors are looking at a projected internal rate of return of around 8.6%, with a payback period of approximately 24 years. For a long-term infrastructure investment, those are solid numbers. To understand why Thailand's project matters, you need to understand what makes the Strait of Malacca so important and so problematic. This waterway, stretching between the Indonesian island of Sumatra and peninsular Malaysia, is one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. At its narrowest point, the strait is barely 2.5 kilometers wide, yet it serves as the primary shipping lane connecting the Indian Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. The numbers tell the story. Roughly 40% of global trade passes through the Strait of Malacca every year. That represents trillions of dollars in goods. Everything from crude oil and liquefied natural gas to container ships stacked with consumer electronics, clothing, and industrial components. 100,000 ships annually navigate these waters. That's a staggering amount of maritime traffic compressed into a relatively small area. And it's not just commercial vessels. Military ships, fishing boats, and passenger ferries all share the same congested waters. Unsurprisingly, accidents are common. On average, the strait experiences more than 60 maritime incidents each year. These range from minor collisions and groundings to major disasters involving oil spills or ship fires. Each incident doesn't just affect the vessels involved. It can snarl traffic throughout the strait, creating delays that ripple across global supply chains. And then there's the capacity problem. Maritime analysts have warned that the Strait of Malacca is approaching its maximum sustainable traffic volume. Some projections suggest it could reach full capacity by 2030, the same year Thailand plans to open its land bridge. What happens when the world's most important shipping lane reaches capacity? Delays increase, costs rise, risk multiplies, and the global economy becomes more vulnerable to disruption. This is where Thailand's alternative route becomes not just attractive, but potentially essential. If even a fraction of the traffic currently using the strait could be diverted through the land bridge, it would ease congestion, reduce accident risks, and provide the global trading system with much-needed redundancy. For Thailand, this represents an extraordinary opportunity. Instead of being a country that ships pass by on their way to somewhere else, Thailand could position itself as an indispensable node in the global trading network, a place where goods must stop, transfer, and generate economic activity. It's the same strategic transformation that made Singapore wealthy, that turned Dubai into a global hub, that built Panama's economy around its famous canal. Geography is destiny, but only if you know how to exploit it. While Beijing sees opportunity in Thailand's land bridge, Washington sees a problem. The United States hasn't officially opposed the project. Diplomacy rarely works that bluntly. But American strategic interests are clearly at odds with what Thailand and China are trying to accomplish. To understand why, we need to look at the role the Strait of Malacca plays in American strategic thinking. For decades, the United States Navy has maintained a dominant presence in the Indo-Pacific region. American military bases dot the map from Japan to Australia, from South Korea to Diego Garcia. And the Strait of Malacca sits at the center of this strategic architecture. The American military maintains close defense relationships with several countries surrounding the strait. Malaysia, despite its sometimes complicated relationship with Washington, has defense agreements with the United States. Singapore, which gained independence from Malaysia in the 1960s, has actively cultivated American military presence, formally opening the Changi Naval Base to U.S. vessels in 2004. Even India, though historically non-aligned, has coordinated with American interests in maintaining freedom of navigation through the Strait and the broader Indian Ocean region. This network of relationships and military facilities gives the United States significant influence over one of the world's most strategic waterways. In military planning terms, the Strait of Malacca represents a potential leverage point, a place where, in a crisis scenario, maritime traffic could potentially be monitored, controlled, or even disrupted. Now consider what happens if the land bridge succeeds. Suddenly, China and other nations have a viable alternative route. Cargo that once had to pass through the strait, under the watchful eyes of American allied military forces, can now bypass it entirely. The strategic leverage that the strait represents begins to erode. For American planners, this isn't just about shipping routes. It's about the broader balance of power in Asia. China's growing economic influence in Southeast Asia has been a source of concern in Washington for years. The Belt and Road Initiative has already funneled billions of Chinese dollars into infrastructure projects across the region, from ports in Sri Lanka to railways in Laos. Thailand's land bridge represents another massive Chinese infrastructure investment in a strategically vital location. And unlike some Belt and Road projects in more remote areas, this one sits at the crossroads of global commerce, directly challenging a waterway where American influence has been strong. According to observers familiar with the diplomatic discussions, the United States has been working behind the scenes to influence Thailand's decision-making. The approach is multifaceted, raising concerns about the project's financial viability, offering alternative partnership opportunities, and emphasizing the importance of maintaining balanced relationships rather than becoming too dependent on any single partner, meaning China. But American leverage in Thailand is limited. The two countries have a defense treaty dating back to the Cold War era, but the relationship has been complicated by periodic military coups in Thailand and shifting political dynamics in Bangkok. Unlike Singapore or the Philippines, Thailand has always maintained a more independent foreign policy posture, carefully balancing between major powers rather than firmly aligning with any single one. Moreover, the economic logic of the land bridge is compelling for Thailand in ways that American concerns about geopolitical balance simply aren't. Thai officials are looking at job creation, GDP growth, and transforming their southern provinces. From Bangkok's perspective, the project is about Thailand's development, not about the US-China rivalry. The durability question. Even if Thailand successfully passes the necessary legislation in 2025, even if Chinese investors commit the capital, even if construction begins on schedule in 2026, there remains a fundamental question. Can Thailand maintain the political will to see this project through to completion? Large infrastructure projects are, notoriously prone to delays, cost overruns, and political interference. And Thailand's recent political history hasn't exactly been a model of stability. The country has experienced multiple military coups over the past few decades, with power alternating between civilian governments and military rule. The land bridge project, by its nature, will span multiple election cycles and potentially multiple governments. Construction alone is expected to take at least 4 to 5 years, with full operational capacity requiring additional time. That means the project will need sustained political support across different administrations, each with potentially different priorities and relationships with China and the United States. There's also the question of public opinion within Thailand itself. While the economic benefits are projected to be substantial, large-scale infrastructure projects often face local opposition. Environmental concerns about port development, land acquisition disputes, and worries about changing the character of rural southern provinces could all generate political resistance. The southern regions of Thailand where the land bridge would be built are also predominantly Muslim areas, culturally and religiously distinct from the Buddhist majority in central and northern Thailand. These provinces have experienced periodic separatist violence and tension with the central government. Building massive infrastructure projects in these sensitive areas requires not just capital and engineering expertise, but also careful political management and community engagement. International pressure adds another layer of complexity. While China offers the financial resources and construction expertise to make the project viable, accepting such massive Chinese investment comes with strings, both explicit and implicit. Thailand will need to navigate between maintaining its relationship with China while also managing its traditional ties with the United States and other partners. The 50-year franchise contracts being offered to private investors provide some stability. Companies won't commit billions in capital without reasonable assurance that the project won't be canceled midway through. But political risk remains real, and it's factored into every investor's calculations. What success would mean? If Thailand manages to navigate all these challenges, if the legislation passes, if the funding materializes, if construction proceeds relatively smoothly, if the project opens around 2030 as planned, what would success actually look like? For Thailand itself, the transformation could be profound. The southern provinces, currently among the poorest in the nation, would become economic engines. The 280,000 jobs represent not just employment numbers but entire new industries and economic ecosystems. Port cities would boom. Logistics companies would establish regional headquarters. Manufacturing facilities would be drawn to the area by the promise of efficient transportation links. The broader economic impact, that projected 5.5% annual GDP contribution, would give Thailand resources to invest in education, healthcare, and further infrastructure development. It could accelerate Thailand's development trajectory, potentially moving the country more firmly into the ranks of upper-middle-income nations. For China, success would mean more than just a good investment return. It would represent a genuine alternative to the Strait of Malacca, reducing one of the most significant vulnerabilities in China's economic model. Even if only a portion of Chinese shipping routes through the land bridge, it provides options and flexibility that simply don't exist today. The strategic implications extend beyond China alone. Japan, South Korea, and other East Asian trading nations would also benefit from an alternative route. During typhoon season, when weather can make the Strait of Malacca treacherous, having another option becomes even more valuable. For global trade more broadly, the land bridge represents increased capacity and resilience. As the world economy continues to grow, and as trade between Asia and the rest of the world increases, having multiple routes between the Indian and Pacific Oceans isn't just convenient, it becomes necessary. And perhaps most significantly, a successful land bridge project would demonstrate a new model for regional infrastructure development. Unlike the Canal proposal, which would have required Thailand to undertake the massive project largely alone, the land bridge leverages international investment and expertise. It's a partnership model that other countries facing similar infrastructure challenges might seek to replicate. The broader context. Thailand's land bridge doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a broader transformation happening across Asia's infrastructure landscape. China's Belt and Road Initiative has been the most visible and ambitious effort, pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe. But it's not the only game in town. The United States and its allies have proposed alternative frameworks, like the Blue Dot Network and the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, aimed at providing high-quality infrastructure development that competes with Chinese offerings. India has been expanding its own infrastructure investments in neighboring countries, concerned about Chinese influence in what it considers its natural sphere of interest. Japan, despite its aging population and low-growth economy, continues to be a major infrastructure investor across Southeast Asia, often offering competitive alternatives to Chinese proposals. This competition for influence through infrastructure investment has become one of the defining features of 21st-century geopolitics. Roads, railways, ports, and power plants aren't just about economic development. They're about establishing relationships, creating dependencies, and shaping the future orientation of nations and regions. Thailand's land bridge sits at the intersection of all these competing interests. It's a Chinese-backed project in a traditionally American-aligned country, located at one of the world's most strategic choke points, with implications for India, Japan, and every other nation that depends on trade flowing between East Asia and the rest of the world. The project's fate won't be determined solely by engineering feasibility or economic projections. Politics, diplomacy, and strategic calculations will play equally important roles. The final count. As 2024 draws to a close and 2025 approaches, Thailand stands at a crossroads. The legislative process continues to move forward. Chinese investors wait with capital ready to deploy. American diplomats work behind the scenes to shape outcomes. And in southern Thailand, in the provinces that would be transformed by this project, people watch and wonder whether this grand vision will actually materialize. The history of ambitious infrastructure projects is mixed. Some, like the Suez and Panama Canals, fundamentally transformed global trade and made their host countries immensely wealthy. Others, like countless failed development schemes across the developing world, became expensive monuments to overreach and poor planning.